our presentation.
Thank you so much, Ariella. And once again, a very, very warm welcome to all of our panelists and participants. So without further ado, I'd like to begin our second webinar, which is the highway to the Holland Marsh, developing for the past. Before we begin, I'd just like to read out our land acknowledgement, which states that we acknowledge the land where EcoSpark, GBYA's parent organization, has its office, is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, and the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And finally, we acknowledge that the lands where all Greenbelt youth ambassadors reside in are the traditional territories of many nations and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And now to meet your facilitators and your panelists. And I will pass it to Nita to introduce them.
Okay, thank you. So all these pictures are of all the Greenbelt youth ambassadors, so you can see everyone, even if their camera isn't on, they're on there. So the Greenbelt Youth Ambassadors are a team of high school and post-secondary students from all around the greater Golden Horseshoe region who have united to work towards protecting and expanding the Greenbelt while promoting sustainability and the establishment of complete communities. The Greenbelt Youth Ambassadors program is run by an environmental charity known as EcoSpark that strive to create the next generation of environmental leaders for a better future. And finally, the GBYA program is funded by the Lawson Foundation. So let's just meet some of your facilitators.
So hi, I'm your facilitator, Aditi.
And I'm your facilitator, Nita.
I'm Cindy. Next, we'll introduce our panelists for today. So first we have the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition. And from that organization, we have Claire. That organization is an inspiring umbrella group that provides leadership and motivates people to take action to protect Lake Simcoe. And our next panelists are from Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition. And from that organization, we have Margaret and Blythe. The Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition is an environmental organization that advocates for expanding Ontario's Greenbelt for transparency and accountability in how we make decisions about growth and for the power of community in addressing many of the challenges we face today.
All right, so let's get right into the discussion half of our webinar. So Nita is going to start off with the first question.
Okay, so the first question is, what are your concerns about the Bradford Bypass?
Who would you like to answer first? Claire or me or all of us?
It doesn't really matter who goes first, but you can answer.
I'll start off first. I think my biggest, there's lots of concerns first off, and I'm sure Claire will mention the things that she's concerned with Blythe as well. So I won't steal the whole thunder because frankly, that question can probably take a few minutes on its own just to list all of the major concerns. But I think that one of the problems that I have with the biggest problem is that it just evidences to me that nobody is really taking climate change very seriously when we're considering building a 4 to 6 lane highway through the Greenbelt, right on the shores of Lake Simcoe. And equally frustrating is that the politicians haven't really thought that maybe it should be rethought. It's a 30-year-old zombie project that everyone thinks is still as relevant and still as needed and will still solve all the problems that we were experiencing 30 years ago. And frankly, the context has clearly changed. And yet no one seems to really be thinking about, well, how do we make a better decision than this? So that's one of my major concerns. I'll let the other girls finish their concerns.
Blythe, why don't you go next and then I'll wrap up.
Okay. So I agree with everything that Margaret said. And then as well, statistics have shown that the GTA has longer commutes than cities like New York and Los Angeles. And governors and whatnot and people who support the Bradford Bypass are using the statements that it will reduce congestion and reduce traffic and reduce wait times such as that. But in reality, we all know that more highways just make more cars to go on the highways, which will inevitably create more congestion. And so I think that with commutes such as those, it has large impacts on people's physical and mental well-being, as well as the environment. And so those are the things that are concerning me as well, especially for people, younger people who, as they grow up and start driving and whatnot, will likely be taking this route. And it will just increase the amount of times that we have to be in our car and the amount of time that we have to spend in our cars and not with our families or not outside or not doing hobbies that we enjoy.
Excellent points. I just want to make sure people know what we're talking about first. So there's a highway proposed to go between 400 and 404. As Margaret said, it's been in people's imaginations for like 30 years, more, maybe going back to the 50s, I've heard. There are traffic problems in the area, and the provincial government is pushing this project, and Bradford, West Gwillimbury, and East Gwillimbury have been major pushers too. And one of my concerns is the misinformation that's coming from those three bodies of government. It really offends me when the people who we elect and pay out of our tax dollars to protect the commons, because that's all that government can do. You can't do it, I can't do it. That's their job, that they're not doing that, and that they're spreading misinformation about it, not bothering to get to the bottom of it and figure out what the problems are, and then kind of doing a big cover up. So in addition to the problems that Blythe and Margaret have mentioned, I think, Lake Simcoe is going to be affected, and that has not been studied. So at a minimum, that has to be studied. And then the people who are pushing the project have to say, yeah, you know what, I want to mess up Lake Simcoe. Sign me up, right? But if that doesn't get studied, then we can't really hold anybody accountable for that decision. Because they will say, oh, we didn't really know. So I think it's about transparency and disclosure, so that the people who we elect are going to be able to do the job that we expect them to do. I mean, it will add salt to Lake Simcoe. It'll, which is bad. We're on a trajectory to hit ocean salinity in 38 years if things don't change. So just that alone, I mean, things need to change. Things need to change, and this is an example of things not changing at all. So I know we're going to talk about this for a while, so we'll leave it to other questions.
So our next question is, the Holland Marsh is one of the most productive specialty crop agricultural areas in this country. So can you speak to some of the negative impacts that the Bradford Bypass would have on this region?
Do you want me to handle that, Claire, or do you want to go for it?
Okay, I'll start this time and then you can wrap it up.
Okay.
So it doesn't go through the agricultural area, really. It's people will debate this endlessly. The Holland Marsh is a large ecosystem that includes provincially significant wetland, which this highway would go over. So whether this impacts the farmland in the area is another question. There is some farmland that's very low lying, that's just downstream, north actually, sort of flowing off the Oak Ridges Moraine and down into the Lake Simcoe Basin. So I mean, if you have salt in agricultural area, that would be bad for production. I mean, I talked to the CAO of the Conservation Authority a couple of days ago, and he said he wasn't aware that there were salt problems in the Holland Marsh, and that his concerns were actually much more around groundwater and the river water, salt infiltration into those water bodies.
I would just add that the environmental assessments for the Bradford Bypass did show that agricultural land would be removed, but not necessarily from the specialty crop area, which is the part that Claire is talking about. So there will be impacts as far as land removal of agriculture. And I think that's, Claire brought up an interesting point, is that the groundwater, based on the studies that were completed in 1997, already showed that surface water and groundwater would be contaminated. So we are now, that was decided well before source water protection plans from the Clean Water Act. So this project is knowingly going into a situation where the groundwater and surface water is going to be contaminated to a degree, and how that impacts the nearby agricultural systems or people's private wells or municipal wells. It kind of feels like, well, we'll just build it and see what happens. And that's a little bit of a dangerous thing.
Yeah, it definitely is. Did Blythe want to say something?
No, I think that Claire and Margaret pretty much covered it. They know a lot more about the sort of the finer details of this. I'm here to supply the youth perspective and just how it will affect us in the future.
Okay, thank you guys. Those were some really good points and a really interesting perspective on the salt and groundwater. I know I, for one, wasn't able to connect the dots 100% on how the groundwater would affect the agricultural region. Blythe, I'm just going to ask you specifically, how would you think the agricultural impacts that Claire and Margaret discussed, how do you think those would connect to youth?
That's a really great question. I think that for youth, the agricultural impacts, obviously, if agricultural land is going to be removed within the construction of this project, then it will further reduce the amount that we can provide local food and have local food within our diets and whatnot. And I think that, I don't know, that's a really great question. I think that it'll just have less young farmers getting involved. Obviously, there's already a shortage of that, and it's already harder to get younger people involved in agriculture and whatnot. And with less farming land available and with more of it being sold out and built over, it'll become even harder to get younger people involved. And it will also further detach the general population and also youth from where our food comes from. So I think that that's also an important point to acknowledge.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Those are really important points. Claire, did you want to see something?
Yeah, I just want to show people some pictures because I
Yeah,
think
for sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to not interrupt somebody to do that. Just a sec. So this first photo, I think Kathy Wellesley's on the line here. This is her photo. So this is oh no, that's not Kathy's. That is Jeff Laidlaw. Yeah. So this was taken from the route of the proposed Bradford Bypass. So here is the southern tip of Lake Simcoe. It's called Cook's Bay. So you can see the agricultural areas along here, and you can see the Holland River meandering along, right? So the water from the highway, which would be kind of like, you know, like here, in the sort of bottom right of your screen, going over this forest. So, and none of that says highway, right? None of that is like, oh yeah, great. Let's okay. This is another picture. This is a map of the proposed route. So here's Highway 400. This is the town of Bradford. And then over on the right side is Highway 404. The thing is, this is a nice little map because you can't really see the natural features. So we did our own. So what you can see in this map is the natural features that the Bradford Bypass will go through. So as you can see, there is a little bit of agricultural area, quite a lot of woodland and wetland as well. So, and the birding hotspots, I want to put an interchange right where there's a nice birding hotspot. Lots of endangered and threatened animal species live here. And of course, as you know, can only reproduce in certain ecosystem types. So removing those natural features is really bad for those creatures, of course, that, you know, can't vote and can't develop land and don't make any money when anything's developed. So I think it's incumbent on us to also protect them, right? So I just wanted to show people what we're actually talking about. I hope that helps.
I was just wondering if I could just jump in quickly. When we're talking about the highway, some people think because it's called a bypass, they're like, oh, it's just like a bypass. It's like a little small thing. And actually all of those white dots are high-speed interchanges or high-speed ramps, which means they have to be very big and wide. So that's like the footprint of the highway doesn't necessarily reflect the highway of the interchanges. And further, because they're going through marshland, in order to build something very heavy, houses, whatever, you have to get down to virgin soil. You have to get right down to rock or something that you can build on. And that's going to be really difficult. And because they're crossing, I think it's like 13 or 15 different water courses, including the Holland River twice, the East and West branch, they have to make it an elevated highway. So for those of you that are familiar with the Gardner Expressway, how high that is, that's the kind of highway we're talking about here. And so, you know, historically, when they have built roads in the marsh, and there's pictures that we have of way back when, all the machinery gets stuck because it's mud. It's wet. It's not a thing where you would normally put this sort of thing. So when you're seeing that picture that Claire showed, you also have to think about, you know, standing under the Gardner Expressway kind of height, and 4 to 6 lanes, which now they've decided they might have to make it 6 lanes because it's going to be so congested in roughly 20 years that they might just make it bigger to start. So that's kind of the size of it. It's called a bypass, but it's really much more, it's kind of a misnomer because it's more of a freeway, a large freeway.
Yeah, those are actually really, really good points. And Claire, thank you for clarifying what it would actually look like for us. So now moving on to our next question. Can you discuss how the government of Ontario is handling community and public input in terms of the construction of the bypass and the role or importance of youth in joining these conversations?
We're both laughing because this is quite a question. I'll just go quickly, and I know Blythe will have some points. So first off, this highway first was canceled a long time ago, like 2011, roughly, I think it was, or somewhere around there. It was canceled a while ago because the government at the time decided that transit was probably the way that they should go. And since then, the Barrie line has gone from, you know, Union Station up to the city of Barrie and travels through Bradford Bypass. Claire and I and others that are involved in this have reached out to the Minister of Transportation, who is Caroline Mulroney, who also is the riding that this highway would go through. So not only just local MPP, but also the Minister of Transportation. And I can say, and we've reached out to the MTO project team of like questions like, how much is this highway going to cost? Can you show us the data on how you estimated travel times? And I would say that, to put it nicely, we have been ignored. Not even just sometimes ignored, just completely sending us back letters that say the same thing they've already told us 5 or 6 times. So for example, there's an exemption for this highway for it not to complete the studies that they keep saying they're going to complete. And they won't tell us whether they're going to pass this exemption or not. We can't figure out if it's going to be a toll road or not, because internal MTO policy right now is any new highways are going to become toll highways. So basic information is really hard to get. And I would say the consultation process is, and Claire can probably talk about the consultation meeting they had. The consultation is a lot of smoke screens. For example, we did a protest in front of Caroline Mulroney's office, and we're met with 5 cop cars and about 6 cops just as it started to move us away from her office. We had to go to the roadway, which was fine because we actually got more traffic anyways. But we left messages and letters and everything else. And that's the kind of response that we get when we try to get basic information. In fact, at the very beginning of this, we were arguing whether or not this even goes through the Holland Marsh. Claire and I are saying it goes, according to provincial maps, it goes through the wetland complex. They're like, no, it doesn't. And then finally they've conceded. So we feel a little bit like, or I feel like, one, arguing basic facts is very difficult because they won't even necessarily confirm basic facts. It took us a long time to figure out what the price tag of this would be. And when we do try to ask questions, it's like emails don't get answered. No important information comes out of it. It's just more kind of greenwashing, I guess. I'll let Claire and Blythe go because I know Claire probably has a lot to add too.
Yeah, the consultation has been totally infuriating. I mean, yeah, just to give an example of what Margaret just explained, the smoke and mirrors, it's pretty unbelievable. I mean, they have people from the Ministry of Transportation and consultants that have been hired from AECOM to work for the MTO on this project. They're now going around doing this dog and pony show to all the municipal councils and educating them about the project. But because we are doing a really good job of going out to councils and saying, here are all of our unanswered questions. And because we elected you and you have a job that has a description, you know, it's your job to make sure that you don't support and approve crazy projects for which we have no answers, or that we know are going to damage the environment, which you've also committed to protecting. So it's like really a lot of, you know, we're really trying hard to hold them to account and make them uncomfortable. That's our job. So anyway, the MTO is there and they're like, blah, blah, blah. This is how what we're going to do, everything. And then we make sure that the councillors have questions like, but what about the exemption? What if the exemption is passed? What will you do then? And then they just stumble over each other because they don't know the answer, because I think actually nobody knows the answer. And if they know the answer, they will not tell us. So the example is then that, you know, we, as Margaret said, we've been writing letters together. We're like, here are all of our points. We've done tons of research and analysis. And we want to know what's going to happen if you pass this exemption. What process would you be following? And would it even include public consultation? And then they wrote back to say, we have an exemption posted on the website and we have this Class CA process. And they just describe what we already know that they're doing that makes no sense. And I got 2 of the same letters from 2 different people in a 2-week period of time. But the second letter had the environment will be protected in red lettering underlined, which nobody's laughing at that except for Margaret. Okay, that is funny, guys, because government doesn't do that. They do not do that. They should not be writing letters where their main defense is, I'm using red lettering, and don't do it in your essays either. So it's like total garbage. And we're getting the runaround from the people that we pay to run the province. So that's ridiculous. And the consultation that they hosted was an hour and a half instead of the 3 hours they said it would be. And they had pre-selected questions that they answered. There was no live Q&A. There was no way to see who else was on the call. And they didn't answer the most important questions. If they pass the exemption, we think that there will be no more requirement to actually do public consultation, which is why we keep asking them the question they refuse to answer. Good times.
Wow, honestly, I'm kind of shocked that, like, I've never heard of them just trying to keep you out of their office by having cop cars there and, like, the extreme lengths they would go to. So just to follow up for both of you guys, do you think that if youth just found out about this, they would be, like, something powerful would happen? Or would you think that they would just, like, shoo it off, like, oh, it's the environment, like, whatever?
So I think that what government is most afraid of, and you can pick any level, is people working together, regardless of age, race, location, political affiliation. They really don't like that because it means that you have more and more people that are going to disagree with your policies. So Blythe can talk a little bit about the youth angle if she wants, but I think that we are used to hearing about pipelines and climate change, and that's become pretty kind of emblazoned in our narrative about how those things are just really bad because it's fossil fuel infrastructure. And now we have to also broaden that list to say highways are also in this. Climate leaders don't build highways is a thing that we've heard that some of the politicians really don't like when we use that. And climate leaders don't keep paving over green spaces for houses that just enrich developers. So we should also be looking at kind of that broader list. But yeah, I think the more people that we have that actually fight for something versus against something, of sure, we don't want the bypass, but it's not because we just hate highways because, you know, we just picked on highways one day. It's because we know, especially with the IPCC report that just came out, we cannot afford to be emitting more carbon. It's not a thing. This highway is going to be a high emitting carbon piece of infrastructure, not only from the cars that are going to be on it, but also from its construction. And we are actually fighting for a livable climate, for a healthy Lake Simcoe, for healthy communities. Like, people don't recognize how much highways impact the health of people that live around them. Benzene poisoning in children's lungs is not a cool thing. It is something that people are developing asthma, chronic lung conditions, cancers. I mean, this is all public health data that we have known for decades. And yet we're still here in the 2000s, in the midst of a climate emergency, pushing solutions that came up in the 1950s when the auto manufacturers and the housing people decided, hey, do you know what'd be really good? Is we had really long roads so you could drive your car to your house. These are still the solutions that we're putting in, and it just baffles my mind. So I know I didn't answer your question probably as succinct as I should, but I can get onto these rants because why are we doing this? Really, why? We have no economic argument to say that it increases jobs or increases prosperity. In fact, we have economic evidence to show the opposite. We know that it affects racialized and marginalized communities more. We know that it pollutes our waters and it cuts out green space. We know that it harms our carbon sequesters, our wetlands and groundwater. Like, so where is the advantage here? And really, we just have an old economic model that youth really should be fighting against, not just youth, but everybody, because it's not going to benefit anyone. Just the few people that make the millions of dollars of building the roads and building the houses that are going to surround those roads, right?
I kind of want to throw that question back at the youth. I think at 47, I don't really qualify as youth anymore. So I would love it if youth were involved with my group. My experience has not been that youth really are coming out. So it's really good to see you guys, all you people, not just guys at all. But I mean, I don't know, you tell me, what are youth engaged in and what do they care about? And how can we make this message resonate with you? Because I would like more of that.
Yeah. And that maybe Blythe can kind of weigh in on that too.
Yeah, sure. Back when you guys were talking about the difficulties of getting any sort of public consultation on this project, anything whatsoever, it's very, you can see quite clearly that no youth were consulted about this project, or no one asked youth what they thought of it, even though since it will take a little bit to build, we are going to be the ones that are also going to be using it. We won't be relying on our parents anymore to drive us places or whatnot. And I think that youth don't have information about this subject. I only learned about it when I started working with Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition just in July. None of my peers knew about it, none of my classmates, siblings, friends, etc. No one knew about it unless I was the one that told them. So I think that that's a barrier that youth are facing. And after I told them what was happening, and I told them about how it would go through the marsh and how it would emit so much more greenhouse gases into the air, whatnot, they were shocked by it and they were upset by it, but they just didn't know how to act. So I think that mobilizing youth and giving them opportunities of here's something that you can do right now in order to fix it, like sending emails with direct links to talking to local representatives. No one knows about the petition, things like that. And youth are the ones that, along with the general population, but youth are sometimes left out of the fact that we are going to be facing the consequences that this project will build, especially as the years go by, of all the changes in the climate and the lack of healthy ecosystems brought by paving them over and then using them to emit more GHGs into the air through all the cars. And then that will also, like I said, affect the mental and physical health. Like Margaret said about how this is also a public health issue. Youth perspective needed to be heard on this issue, but they never asked youth if we have any thoughts on it, even though we are directly affected, which is pretty upsetting. And it's also upsetting that no young people really know, and no young people have been given steps on what to do and how to affect it or anything.
And I think
don't take it personally. Like, they're not consulting anybody.
Yeah.
So I think if you want to get involved, just jump in there. Like, you shouldn't be waiting for a youth special on this, because they will not ever produce it. Like, we're trying to help engage people, but almost none of us are getting paid for this work, right? Like, my organization has no money for this campaign. So like, resources are thin. And I think people need to understand that these issues are non-profit issues, right?
Yeah.
Like, we run nonprofits. We don't have masses of money to make a splashy spread that's going to look as good as whatever else is on Instagram or something. It's like, if you care, you're going to have to do a little bit more digging. And I'm putting some resources here for you folks. And just don't hold your breath, like waiting for them to invite you. You just have to be noisy.
And I think that also kind of brings back to the fact that a lot of the majority of these campaigns, spreading the awareness on things like this, it's happening online. And in the real world and online, youth circles are really detached from adult circles. So I feel like getting more youth involved in accessing the information that adult-led organizations like Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition and Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, if we can get youth to access those informations, then they will start sharing it amongst their youth circles. And then that's how we can sort of exchange information. Because I feel like some people may be holding their breath and may be waiting for something to be handed to them so they can easily click on it and act. But like I said, a lot of people just don't know. And I feel like spreading the information between those two circles and making connectivity between the two and collaboration is how we're going to get more people involved.
And I'll just add in that, the issue that we're facing with consultation and engagement of youth and engagement of most people. I mean, the fact is that they know that public health data says you shouldn't build a highway within 500 meters of a school or a home or a park because of how detrimental it is to children's lungs. And yet anybody that's doing, supporting the bypass, that isn't something that's shared. So it's not this informed consent, right? And it goes back to that whole idea of consultation, which is what Indigenous communities have been facing for ages, is that we assume, we being the government, they assume that if you care, you will be there. And if you don't care, you won't be there. But not recognizing that there's economic, social barriers, even travel barriers or access to information. Like, there's all kinds of barriers that actually have to be addressed to properly consult free, informed, and prior consent. But what ends up happening is they just assume, oh, we only had 5 people write a letter. Well, that means only 5 people actually care. And that becomes very cynical. And that's how consultation is run now. So it might just be, we're talking about the bypass, but you look at any infrastructure project in your municipality, at the provincial level, at the federal level, that is all the working assumption that they go from, is if you're not here, it's because you don't care. And if you don't care, we don't have to listen to you. Because historically, the people that show up that do care are the ones that vote, are the ones that are more wealthy, and frankly, are the ones that are white. So that's who they catered to. That's who the consultation process caters to, and it leaves a whole bunch of people out, including the youth.
I agree. That was really well said.
Yeah, you guys all brought up really interesting points. So, for the youth perspective, honestly, if I look at the people I know and all my friends, if it's not posted on Instagram, if it's not on Apple News,
Yep.
they have no idea what's happening. So, it's honestly like it's kind of like the effort too, right? Like they know something wrong is happening, but like they don't want to search up an article, read on how like they can fix it or how like they can do something about it, right? And I know Blythe, you talked about how youth really aren't like involved whatsoever. If like, should we build this highway? Let's ask the youth. Like that doesn't happen. So what's your angle on how youth should be brought up to the political table? Like how they can be involved in these things?
Yeah, I think that it's hard to bring youth up to the political table, especially without the help of adults. I honestly don't think that youth are going to be able to have their voices heard on political matters without adult mentors and without adult organizations helping raise them up, because youth are seen as, inexperienced and we don't know as much. And even if we might know as much, we simply just don't have the experience and going through all the processes that you have to in order to speak to your council and learn how to make a deputation and learn how to get it out and known and make an effort. It takes a lot of trial and error. And if there are time sensitive campaigns and whatnot, by the time youth figure out how to do it, we might be left behind already. So I think that a way to elevate them is to, like I said, have more collaboration between the adult groups and the adults in the community that are already involved, and the youth that maybe want to get involved but don't know how to begin or are too intimidated or don't even have a ride or something like that. Collaboration by the people that can sort of help enable youth, and then youth can bring our energy and our determination and whatnot. I think that is something that should be acknowledged.
Yeah, those are really good points that you brought up.
Guys, can I add something to this? I think that it's not as hard as you maybe make it sound to start. Like anybody can sign a petition. You can actually sign a petition you know nothing about, right? So like, don't be afraid. Like this is your world, guys. Like this, you have to just start. Don't be worried about being wrong. Don't be worried about being marginalized. Like, look, most of us are women. We're marginalized a lot. But it doesn't stop us from being like, no, this is wrong. All you need to say is like, I don't agree. I care about this, this, and this, and I think this is a bad plan. And I would like you to explain why you think it's a good plan. You do not need to have all the answers to voice your opposition. So don't be intimidated by that. It's really, really important. Secondly, so there's some, not everybody is as magical as Nari Wang. But seriously, you've got to look up Nari Wang, and I'm just going to put it in the chat. You can search for her. She's 13. She did a delegation to council in Simcoe County a month ago, 2 months ago. She made a phone call, and I basically said what I just said to her, and was like, yeah, you just have to say, this is what I want. This is the future I want, and I want you to think about these things when you make these decisions. And so don't be intimidated. Please just go out and try to participate and know that we are very happy to help you. Also, our jobs are to reach as many people as possible. So we use the news, right? Because it's free. You just have to talk to a journalist for half an hour and you reach 20,000 people. So read the news because that's where a lot of information is. Right. So follow us on our social media platforms, ask us questions. That's no problem. But yeah, I think you can do something right now. Like don't wait for the process to be, less threatening, because it's actually really still threatening. I'm worried about people suing me like every day.
Yeah. And even just you saying that to us, we don't get that. If it's just the youth circle, we're all talking amongst ourselves about, okay, how are we supposed to, jump in and how do we do this and whatnot? So even just a more experienced person coming in saying, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to make up this huge plan or whatnot. Even just reposting a petition on your Instagram story is the way that you're going to get more people involved. And yeah.
Thank you for those like really important points. I think you should definitely we should all keep that in mind. And continuing off of how we can spread awareness, can you discuss some ways we can effectively and efficiently gain exposure to this cause?
Me, I guess. Okay. So the first thing is that we do have a petition on change.org that I think is around 2,600 people. And that's a good start, because once you sign that petition on change.org, you can just look it up, change.org, stop the Bradford Bypass. Once there's updates or action items, that petition gets updated. And so just keep in touch with that. And then I think the other thing is that, similar to don't be afraid, what Claire was saying about don't be intimidated to go in front of counselor, don't be afraid to say something. With social media, it's the same idea. You don't have to have all of the answers, but just say, hey, here's a link to this petition. This sounds really crazy. And I know that there's this kind of like undercurrent in Canadian culture that's like, you don't talk about certain things because you want everything to kind of stay copacetic, like don't talk politics and don't talk religion and don't talk, but I feel like we need to get into those conversations a little bit, and politics being one of those. So, I tell my kids, you can, like I said to my son, he was turning 13, I said, you can use my vote for this federal election if you can tell me why I should vote a certain way and like, what are the platforms that you agree with? So I will vote your way, just tell me what it is. But we have to start thinking about kind of the political side. So use your social media and use your network. Sometimes people are thinking of like, there's like a thing, a silver bullet that will make a difference. If we just did this one thing, all of this would go away. And Claire will probably agree with me. There's never a silver bullet. I've never seen a campaign that says there is one thing, if we could just do one thing, this will be over. It's not. It's like multiple shots across the bow. And it's people doing their little piece, however they feel like they want to do it. So if it's joining on the petition, if it's sending stuff out in Instagram, if it's looking for it in the media, look up Bradford Bypass, share an article with your friends. Like, it doesn't have to be a one thing. And I learned that the hard way, because I was always looking for that one thing that's going to solve all of this and we're going to fix it. It's not. Let people like feel like you can be involved, because every little bit of involvement matters. And there's this feeling like, oh, we have to have like 80,000 people to make a difference. And frankly, when you start looking at the civil rights movement down in the States with when Martin Luther King, the popularity of when some of the campaigns started to shift, he was only about 15% of like people agreed with him in popularity polls. So don't assume that you have to have the majority. You don't. You just have to be there and show up however that works for you. And if that means it's all social media, do it. If it means you're really good at writing a letter, do it. I mean, there's no silver bullet. Look for a way that you can live and speak your values in a way that's helpful. I'll share that petition link in a second here.
Thank you.
It's already been done twice.
Oh, has it? Okay,
yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. That's a really important point. Do you, Claire or Blythe, have something to say?
Yeah, watch council meetings. Yeah, that's how you see how council works. And you are supposed to be really good at the computer. Not good at the computer. So use that skill. Go look at like, when does council meet in my area, and then watch a council meeting. It's going to be a bit painful, but that is how the world works. And if you want to change it, you have to understand it, and it's not all going to be that fun. So if you want to be like informed, you have to read the news and you have to share it. And if you want to be part of a movement and you want to be anything of a leader, like, you do need to understand about how things work. As Margaret was saying, do you have to kind of engage in politics a bit? So it's a decision. I think, the planet's on fire. I think we should react. And I think that maybe, watching a council meeting and understanding a bit more about how government works is not that bad in comparison. So just try to weigh the options a little bit. Like, am I going to engage in this? What's the harm? What is the harm in watching a council meeting about an issue that I care about? So we'll try to, keep you informed about what is coming up when. I mean, for example, I know a lot of people don't like Facebook anymore, but I can't use Instagram. We would love someone to help make Instagram thing for us. But, we share on Facebook all the time, like, I'm delegating to council. It's at this time. Here's the link. Come and watch. So you can watch and learn. It's never been easier because everything is on Zoom. You don't even need a ride. So yeah, there's lots and lots of ways for folks to learn more and get involved here. I'm just gonna put up a link to our website and all the media that we've got. Lots of it is with Margaret's group too. But yeah, we do a ton to try to get out in front of people in the media because it's the most efficient way for us to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are all very good points. And that's a very interesting point, actually, to watch the council meeting. I know I never would have thought of that to do on my own. So thank you very much. And I guess now we can move on to our live Q&A for our last 10 minutes. So the first question that I'm going to start with is, it seems like most of the youth are around the GTA area in comparison to further up north. So how can we get youth located further south to care about what's happening up north?
Blythe, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I live in the north compared to Toronto, in the GTA, and I think that even though there is distance between the north and the south, online and through people's extracurriculars and even through some school things, people and teenagers are connected. And so the way that young people like to connect is online and through social media and whatnot. And I think that is a tool that could be used in just getting it into the youth circles, the information, and then people sharing that to their Instagram story and causing a ripple effect. And I think that that's how we could reach it.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that for I'm answering it for youth, but it applies to everybody, is that if we know there are certain offenders that are making our climate situation worse, then those should become priorities. And it shouldn't matter if a highway is being built way, way, way up north or way, way, way down south, or if it's pipelines and certain, like, those become priority targets, frankly. That doesn't matter where you are. Any of those getting built is going to be a problem for our future livability. And I'd just like to add that the province, as far as like the Bradford Bypass and the 413, everyone knows those two highways, but in the recent master transportation plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, or for pretty much southern central Ontario, there are more highways planned. These aren't the last two, then we're done with it. They have another, 50 kilometers roughly on the other side of Lake Simcoe. They have more in southwestern Ontario. This is not just, these are probably the most offensive because they're getting pushed the hardest and the quickest, but they're reviving old highway projects all over the province. So, I think we have to start to assemble in who are the worst offenders, what projects are the worst offenders, and we just push back on those all the time. Because I will tell you that the developer lobbyists and all of the lobbyists for the concrete companies and all that sort of thing, people that the government hears from are those people who look to enrich themselves at our expense. Guess how it's going to go? So we need to recognize that just even a short email, a short phone call, could make all the difference to let them know that there's more than just that. So that's what I would say is, let's look at the worst offenders and target those without any sort of like, oh, that's up north or that's down south. No, all of them, which is why we work closely with the 413 group, because it doesn't matter if Bradford Bypass goes through and the 413 doesn't, or vice versa, we're still in trouble. It's better that one doesn't go through, but ideally neither would go through, and no more would go through anywhere in Canada.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know that people, from what I've seen online, and young people, they definitely do have the capacity to kind of go past the boundaries of their communities, because the amount of social media that I have seen about people being concerned about, you know, pipelines running through Alberta, situations happening in the United States, people are writing letters and signing petitions about those issues. So I think that it's definitely within people's capacity to look a couple hours north or west and realize what's going on and then act. So I think that it can definitely happen.
I think I just really want to hammer home the point about reading the news. It's critical, right? Like, you will not be informed if you don't read the news. So that's how we are communicating with people all over the province, right? Like, Margaret has done a fantastic job this year getting more provincial media on this issue. And until that, we were reaching the people in our area because, you know, like, I've been working on this stuff for 20 years. So the media contact me all the time to have a, can you comment on this? Can you comment on that? Can you comment on that? It's great. But we needed to go farther, right? And so, like, to your point, Blythe, people write messages about something that will never directly affect them. I actually would like to hear from other people, what are the issues that are really engaging youth, and where can we push? Because I can't speak for that demographic anymore. So I'd like to hear from you folks about what matters to you.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wanted to put something in the chat and just get a whole bunch of broad answers for Claire.
Thank you. That's a really important point, like, especially since COVID-19, we've all, like, seen how, like, connected people are to online, like, different social medias. Another question we had, what is your take on the Ontario government setting up a youth council?
Setting up a youth council, is that what you, sorry, you cut it out there at the end?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll just repeat the question. What is your take on the Ontario government setting up a youth council?
No takers again. I would say the quick answer is anything to engage more people in their government is a good step. If it is being used to greenwash and to provide cover for bad decisions and to make it look like they're listening and to make it look like they care about the issues, then I think it's bad. And the history of this government is that that is exactly what they do. They set up committees, they set up consultations. I mean, when the aggregate, aggregate mining and consultation went through at the beginning of their mandate, they didn't invite anybody other than aggregate companies to talk about how they should change aggregate. Environmentalists weren't allowed. And actually, I know somebody who was an environmentalist who dressed up, like she was a woman, dressed up as a man just to get in to this consultation. So the history of how consultations work and how councils work, and the Greenbelt Council is another one of how that all went. So yes, yay to youth. Yes, that committee needs to be empowered and independent and be able to voice and be able to bring issues that might be uncomfortable for the government. But I have hesitation to say this is a really good thing because they're going to use that council appropriately to advocate for youth and youth issues.
Yeah, I'm just to add to that, I agree with everything Margaret said. I mean, I've been on lots of different committees and I've sat as this is another thing you can do with zero experience. You can sit as a community member on an advisory committee for your municipality. And I did that when I was like, I care about like Simcoe, how could I learn? And so I sat on this public official plan review committee, and it was like a 6-month thing. I had to drive to Innisfil from Toronto, where I was living, and go once a month for like a 3 or 4 hour meeting. But I learned a lot, and it completely shaped my future, and it helped me decide that I wanted to be a planner, which I'm not really, but I was trained as a planner. So lots of ways that consultation can be good for you, even if the process is blankety blank, 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 what Margaret said. And yeah, just understand that even like it's helpful. Just go for it, right? Like do it, then you can see how things work and you know more and you will have more contacts and you can say, I did this, and then someone might think you are credible or can be trusted or something. But also, you know, you can be involved in these things and then you can leak information to people who are actually on the right side. So that's also great. Yeah, but the process for public consultation is usually extremely disappointing, but it is really one of the only ways that people who are not running for office or a lobbyist or somebody who pays, you know, to get their way, then, you know, that's one of the few ways that we still have to access the workings of government. So I agree with Margaret. I think it's a good thing, but I'm a bit skeptical. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I agree with what both Margaret and Claire said. I think that it's a really great opportunity for youth, and I think that's really good that youth are even kind of being sought out. But I hope that there isn't any sort of tokenism with the youth and just having us there and not really listening to us. But then I also think that even with all the skepticism and whatnot, I think that it would be a really good thing if we had a whole bunch of climate aware youth that were part of that council, and having as many of people sort of on our side as possible within that would be really beneficial. So I think that everyone here, everyone that is climate minded and environmentally conscious and wants to see the government do more should definitely look into that.
Yeah, those are some really great points. And our last question will be, is there any further public consultation scheduled for the Bradford Bypass?
You can take that one, Claire.
Oh God, I think it maybe is in the fall. Like I honestly cannot remember. Sorry, can't just pop that out of my brain. I can look it up if you want. I'll look it up.
While she's looking up, I would just say this is kind of the problem, is that what we have learned from people that work within government is that they want this highway to go through. They want it to go through before the election. They want early work started, bridges and all that sort of stuff. And it's become a political piece that they can use to show that they're, you know, taking care of rural Ontario or suburban Ontario. And so I think that, I don't know what Claire has for the consultation, but this is the problem, is that we're not getting the information about when it's going to be and what it's going to look like and to what kind of decisions are going to be made there. It's just really a whack-a-mole trying to figure out how do we fit into this process. So, you know, for youth groups, like, you may feel like you don't know how to orient yourself in the process. Don't think that adults know either, because when you have a government that operates this way, that obfuscates and like does not tell you clearly what's going on, nobody's oriented. And that's the point, right? That is the purpose of that.
Sorry, so there's nothing. I mean, we understand that there will be a future consultation, but there's no information on that page. But what you can do, you can go to that webpage and you can sign up for updates. So if this is something you want to follow as an example of some crazy process that you will never fully understand, because we won't either, but you want to kind of practice, like sign up, and then they'll send you an email when they have consultations, and then you can see. So that's what you have to do. I mean, I'm on I'm on lots and lots and lots of lists, and then the government sends you like, hey, we have a consultation. You figure out if you can go or not. So just, yeah, try.
Okay, it looks like that concludes our live Q&A session. Unless there are any other questions, which I don't think there are. So thank you to everyone who attended, and thank you to our panelists for your perspective and your points that I think all of us really needed to hear. And that concludes our second webinar. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you guys so much. Have a great night.
Pleasure. Thank you. Get out there. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, I actually have another meeting that I have to go right now. So thank you guys so much for inviting me.
Bye. Thank you for joining.
Bye.
And I'll just stop the recording right here. Give me one moment.